You've asked me about when I wanted to get organized. I kind of want to hear that story of how, because I feel like we're connected at the hip, that you've sort of passed the torch off to me to help all these ladies. And
my sister and I had both hit bottom, and I'd read somewhere that when you're utterly disgusted with your old ways, until you're that way, you can't break free to newness. I don't no longer believe that. You can, there's any degree of deciding to change. You can decide to change when you just have a little to change. But at that point, we were both desperately disorganized. I was in a very abusive marriage. He didn't hit me, but he was very into that mental abuse kind of deal, and put me down all the time, told me I was worthless, useless, ugly, stupid, all of that. And it wasn't the way I had been raised. Our mom she was a BO, but she was lighthearted. She laughed a lot, and my mom and dad, when I think of them, they had this wonderful marriage, and they adored us. And my mother really would praise my creativity. She'd say, "Oh, did you do that flower arrangement? Oh my gosh, you could work in a florist." I mean, she was always just, it was nice until I got older. Then it was embarrassing, because she'd be in an audience and she'd say, "You are such a wonderful person." And I was like, "Okay, Mom." She was that
back
way.
off.
Yeah, back off. Yeah. So when my sister and I got together, I'd moved back to Vancouver, Washington, where we were raised. And so her separate house and my separate house were disasters, and she knew I was in a bad marriage. And I said, let's get organized. Let's put our heads together and figure out how can we get out of these messes. I'd read every book, because I'm a reader. I read every book on how to get organized that were out at the time. There was, time, control your time in your life, and there were about 10 books out there. They were all written by born organized BOs that just say, get off the couch and do it.
I only read your book.
I know you did, and you wouldn't let yourself read anything else.
I did not want to have what you said diluted by any born organized person. You were more like me. They weren't like me.
They don't know. They don't understand us. And so that's all the magazines that are out there are, when there's this January issue of every magazine in the grocery store is going to say, get organized now. And it's
10 steps to getting organized in the new year.
It's a load of crap. It's all stuff. And so my sister and I said, let's get organized. And I said, this time the thing because I'd tried before. I'd tried stuff, and it didn't work. And I'd go right back down into the mess. And I said, this time I'm going to do it for me instead of trying to make Mr. Cranky happy. Because I was always trying to do it so he'd be nice or he'd be happy. And I said, I'm going to do it for me. And she liked that thought. And she said, I was organized once. And I went, what? Because we had a room together, and it was trashed. And Mom just didn't know how. She read child psychology books that said, well, shut the door to their room, and then out of a natural desire for order, they'll clean it up sooner or later. No. The psychiatrist was a BO. What did he know? So she said, I was organized once. And I said, when? And she said, well, at work. And we had a tickler file that businesses use, and it was 3x5 cards, and you had cards for people that you had to call regularly. And she said, housework is repetitive. It is if you do it. If you do it, it's repetitive. So she said, what if we had a card that said, it's instead of saying call John Ditmore to see if he wants to advertise his mattresses in the newspaper, what if it said make the bed? And so you have an appointment with the bed, and you have that daily. And then you have an appointment with Mr.
Brilliant.
Toilet. Yeah. And how often does Mr. Toilet need to be met? And how often? And so we didn't know how often you do anything, because we hadn't done anything consistently. No habits like you. And so we started asking people, like at PTA meetings, and
how often do you clean your toilet?
Yeah. And the BOs love the question. How often do I clean my toilet? Well, I clean it 4 times a day. I couldn't leave it ever. I couldn't if I did it less than 4 times a day. And they've got one part of their bodies twitching, and they're going to end up in a home when they're about 25. So we didn't want to do that. So we ended up with one sheet of paper of the basics we thought have to be done. And the 3x5 cards were like a baby step. It was just one job on one card. And if you made the bed, you got to file it to the next day in this little card file box. And we, in 6 weeks, just minding, because we found out we mind really well. If somebody would say, you know, would you go do that? We minded. And so this was just direction. And I said to my sister, you know, the only thing we lack is direction. It's not, we love life. It's not motivation. We did want a nice house. We knew what that felt like living in one. Mom's house was just peaceful and streamlined and happy, and I wanted that too. And I'm in this horrible marriage with a house that's just trashed, and I wasn't happy. And so I started with me. I fixed my problem, and then Mr. Cranky stayed cranky, so he laughed. Yay!